so we're off. So did we have a question? Yeah?
Yes.
Yes, it was you.
Exactly. So I do have a question. Obviously, there are some thoughts arising, even in your state. Let's say the state that.
I'm not in a state.
Yeah. Okay. In your.
There's no state.
Okay, but still there are some thoughts arising. So some of them are like desires, let's say, and who is kind of who or what is seeing them, or
No one.
No one. Okay, but still there is something or somebody who is like. Not experiencing, but I'm trying to find the right word.
There isn't. No,
but
there isn't,
still,
and there isn't there either.
Yes, but okay.
That's really the kind of nub of what we're talking about.
So okay, but so who is kind of, or what is kind of know that this is the thought?
What is knowing this? Life is knowing it. Oneness is knowing itself.
That there is a thought, and what you do with that, or what the life.
You could say, well, also I'm slightly suspicious of that way of putting it. You know, that something knows that there's a thought. I mean, to me, it's like, well, it's the definition of a thought is that it's, you know, if there's a thought, it's known. It doesn't need any, you know. It's an assumption that there needs to be something separate from the thought to know it. I mean, it's in the definition of a thought that it's known. A thought, you know, if your thought's not known, it's not a thought. You see what I mean? So there's just thinking. You know, this is really. I mean, this is a very important question because it really is the heart of what we're talking about. You know, quoting from the Upanishads earlier, and also from the Buddha. You know, that there is. You know, there is no. You know, there's what is known, but there's no knower. There are thoughts, but no thinker. I mean, there's a famous, I can't quote it, but there is a kind of very well-known passage, isn't there, from the Buddha? You know, actions there are, but no doer thereof. Thoughts there are, but no thinker thereof. Feelings there are, we might say, but no feeler thereof. Yeah. I mean, this is really the heart of what we're talking about. So it sounds like, you know, in the question there's an assumption that there is duality. There are these two things. There's the thought and the thinker. No. The impression of there being a thinker is created by the thoughts and the other perceptions, the thoughts and the feelings, the physical sensations, for example. That's what creates. You know, so there's thoughts and there's feelings, there's visual impressions, there's the hearing of sounds, and then added to that, there's the assumption that all of those different impressions and perceptions are being experienced by someone, and they're not.
Okay, and with that comes another question about the decision-making process. Let's put it this way. You can, you know, take your cup with your left hand or right hand, and you just took it, okay?
Yeah.
Sometimes you think, like, for example, I need to go to the bathroom now, or can I wait a few more minutes, for example? So there is something like that happening.
Yeah.
Probably happening in your case as well.
Yes.
Okay, and so who or what is making the decision that, okay, right now I go to pick up the...
Again, this is absolutely the nub of what we're talking about. No one is making.
So it just happens.
Yes, a decision is made.
Is made by the life itself.
No, well, you could say that. I quite like that. Actually, quite abstract. A decision is made by life, but you don't have to add made by anyone. Just a decision is made. You could say a decision appears. The language is really important. The language is so misleading. So it seems natural for us to say a decision is made, because we live in a kind of conceptual world where people make decisions. So it sounds perfectly reasonable. So a decision is made, but actually a decision isn't made. Something happens. So you don't make a decision to have a cup of tea now, you know, but drinking a cup of tea happens. what was the other example? If you don't make the decision to go to the bathroom now, but going to the bathroom happens. There's no one in there. I mean, there's all sorts of aspects of this which are really kind of, some people find really important, we haven't even touched on yet. I mean, one of which, of course, is free will. So, there's somebody there makes a decision to go to the bathroom now, or there's somebody there makes a decision to have a cup of tea now, so there's free will. Somebody there's got free will. Then we can have a big argument about whether there really is free will or not, blah, 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 blah. Or that can all just collapse when we realise, no, there isn't somebody there making a decision to have a cup of tea now, it's just a cup of tea happens. So the question of free will collapses. So we could say, what we're talking about here, we could say there's no free will. Right? Now most people, when they hear that, go into a state of, well, some people go into a state of extreme anger about it because it drives them right at the heart of what they find most valuable about themselves. Oh my God, don't tell me I haven't got free will. But in a sense, that's not what I'm saying. That's not what this communication is saying. You see, it's much more profound than that. People write enormously long books about whether there's free will or not. I could even, name and recommend a couple of them if you wanted, But in a sense, that all collapses when it's recognised. It's not that there's no free will, it's that there's no person who could have free will. So it's gone one step more radical, if you like, or one step further back.
How come then can come some desires if there is nobody in there as an person?
Well, how come there can come the sound of this voice when there's no one there? There are phenomena. There are phenomena. The sound of this voice is a phenomena. A desire, you said, how come there can be a desire? A desire is a phenomenon. A phenomenon. The sense that the sound of this voice is heard by someone, and the sense that the desire is felt by someone, is just another phenomenon. It's more difficult to see through that one because it's the core phenomenon. The core phenomenon is that my desiring, my hearing, my seeing, my speaking is mine. That it belongs to, it belongs to a separate factor to all those things, which is me. No. No, the sense of me is just another phenomenon. Weight of a cup of tea happens. Taste of Yorkshire tea bag happens. Sound of a voice commenting on it happens. The sense that all of that belongs to a me happens. That's just another phenomenon.
So the difference between, let's say, you and me, apparently me, is only in the way that there is no me and there is me.
No, because there's no me there either. There's no me here,
Well,
there's no me there.
Well, I'm experiencing that there is me, but hopefully...
So the difference is just in that. So the difference is just that there's an experience there. There's an experience of a me there. It's a false experience, but it's still an experience. It's not really quite right, so it's a false experience. It's an experience which does not accord with reality, let's say.
Okay.
That's the difference. Yeah.
It's almost as though all of that mystery and miraculousness of just seeing or hearing, or touching or tasting gets reducted down into, well, this is me doing it.
Yeah.
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 But it completely loses all the all of that kind of. How does any of that happen?
Yes. Yeah.
We completely.
It seems to become ordinary.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
And actually, it's a fucking miracle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. This is a fucking miracle.
Yeah.
We have no real idea how
Yeah.
this can
this can happen.
emerge from nothing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's a real bypass, isn't it? To use that word again.
In the sense that,
In the sense that that process of reducing down into
yeah,
well, this is me doing all of it. I mean,
yeah,
what a complete fallacy, really, when
Yeah.
you think about it.
yeah. So what's actually quite magical just becomes utterly ordinary.
Absolutely.
Seems to be
Yeah,
ordinary and banal.
yeah,
Going back to
yeah.
some comment before tea about boredom,
Boredom,
and I was saying boredom does tend to collapse when this is seen. Maybe that's why, because, as long as it's felt like there's a centre here experiencing everything and that's just normal and usual and blah, 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 then so much seems banal.
Yeah.
And that might also be what, and by the way, this again, it's definitely not a kind of cosmic law, but it does happen quite a lot that, a lot of times when this is seen, the life that's led after that is a quieter life, a less exciting life in normal terms. And that, I think, that connects with this,
Yeah.
you see, because, when it's me at the centre of it and it's me it's all happening to and blah, 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 then, God, things get boring. I mean, I've done this 1,000 times, da-da-da-da-da-da-da. So there's that maybe more of an impulse, to search for kind of excitement and, let's rob a bank and buy a Ferrari, whatever it might be. And also because the person, the sense of a person, dulls everything down so much. So it's almost like, if experience was a drug, I'm so dulled down to the everyday as a person that I need a bigger and bigger hit, a bigger and bigger drug. So I need to, drive a Ferrari or rob a bank, whatever it might be. And when that has collapsed, when the centre's collapsed, and then experience is kind of experienced in the raw, if you like. Then that kind of haggard sort of, oh God, this is all so boring, I'm so fed up with it, that sort of disappears because everything in a way is constantly new. In almost every talk, and I've just realised this afternoon is not going to be an exception, in almost every meeting I end up at some point quoting this person who phoned Tony. This is from years ago. Tony tells a story that somebody phoned him up, and this had obviously happened to see him, and said, "It's amazing, Tony, I've been sitting in the garden for half an hour watching an ant crawl over a twig." In the kind of normal mind might think, well, for God's sake, that sounds a bit boring. No, not at all. Not if the mind isn't there, not if the person isn't there. The fascination with that. I think I wrote in my first book, it's like the squirrel on a tree trunk. So very simple things become enough when it's not the person who's experiencing them, when it's just experience.
Yeah.
I mean, neurosis is amazing for dulling everything down. Absolutely amazing. There's nothing like neurosis for making life shit. And again, it's not necessarily going to happen, but it's quite likely that if not all, then certainly a lot of neurotic energy will explode out of the system when this is seen. A sudden and catastrophic loss of neurosis. I mean, if this really catches on, it could be fatal to the psychotherapeutic profession, which obviously thrives on neurosis.
Yeah, well, it's another story, isn't it, in neurosis?
Yeah. Well, I'd say yes in a way, but I'd say also it is more than that. I mean, it is an energy. Neurosis has its energy. It's a dulled down energy, if you like. Yeah. It's not just a story.
What's the difference between story and energy?
I suppose by story I mean energy, everything is energy, you could say. Everything, absolutely everything is energy. But by story I mean a kind of a narrative in the mind, a narrative in the head. that says, well, it could be anything, but for example, you know, the reason my life is such shit is because my mother didn't love me, or something like that. That would be a kind of psychotherapeutic story. Or, you know, I will finally be happy when I get my bonus from my company, which is like an economic story. So it's a narrative like that. Yeah. It's energy taking the form of a narrative. Very often about, you know, what life itself or some aspect of life is about. It has a meaning. And again, one of the things in this seeing is it frees us from meaning. It's revealed that everything is completely meaningless. It doesn't have a meaning.
So the
Again,
energy stays and the story disappears. You can say.
Well, as I say, you know, everything is energy in a way. Everything is energy. So yeah, energy is always, you know, if there's something happening, anything happening, there's energy. But the stories tend to disappear, or at least lose their grip on us, or lose their importance. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I mean, I'm not sure. Is this true? If I say stories are always, I'll be cautious in what I say. I'll say stories are mainly, maybe always, but definitely mainly about the past and the future. And again, the past and the future tend to collapse with this seeing. They lose their importance.
Or maybe, you know, I think it could be also from the present moment, like how I interpret things. It's also a story.
Yes, it is, but I can't. I mean, maybe. I mean, I'm not absolutely sure what I'm saying here. You might be able to shoot me down, but I can't. I sort of think I can't really kind of think of constructing a story which doesn't involve past and future as well as the present. You know, so maybe it also again the reality. When I say the reality, the kind of reality of the past and the future tend to collapse. By which I don't mean that they then become imaginary. I think, you know, it's more that the emotional investment in them collapses. And so they're no longer important. You know, the fact that, you know, whatever happened to me when I was 6 years old that I'm sharing with my psychotherapist or whatever, that ceases to be important anymore. Yeah.
So coming back to that place of contraction when we talk about the past and the future, do you think?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's very bound up with that contracted energy. Yeah, to whatever extent this system is holding on to material from the past, or fearing or hoping about material in the future, is going to be contracting. Yeah. Yeah. I think I want to say, I'm not sure where this is going, I think I want to say there's something kind of innocent about the state this leaves us in, or more innocent when this is seen. Because, you know, there might still be thoughts or hopes or expectations about the future, for example, but it's not likely to have that kind of neurotic grasping. So it'll be kind of more innocent in a way. That makes me think of the quote, you know, I very rarely quote from the Bible, but, you know, I do use this one occasionally, you know, that Jesus is supposed to have said, you know, unless you become as little children, you shall not enter the kingdom of heaven. Well, there's an innocence about that.
But we're not talking about naivety.
No, naivety is something else.
Yeah.
I mean, naivety is a polite word for stupidity in a way, isn't it? Yeah. I would say the opposite, because naivety bespeaks a lack of wisdom.
Yeah, or experience. Yeah.
And there is something about this which brings a kind of natural wisdom.
Yeah.
Even just a momentary opening, even a sort of split-second awakening, can bring profound wisdom about the nature of this which was not there before.
Yeah.
And all sorts of stories can collapse in that moment, which is partly what might explain the despair that then follows. Because stories are what the person may use partly to ward off despair.
Mm.
I give my life meaning, and therefore I do not feel despair because I have a story. I was put on this planet for a purpose, whatever it is. I was put on this planet to win souls for Christ, or to save the planet from global warming, or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
So awakening, wisdom in that instance, and shortly afterwards, seeing through these narratives, these stories, which are in some ways ridiculous, in other ways quite sweet, and in other ways they're just what we need to keep ourselves sane as embodied beings, embodied people, you know, and they collapse.
So there's, from what you're saying, there's wisdom which, you know, can't be doesn't belong to anyone in particular.
It doesn't belong to anyone.
Doesn't belong to anyone.
Nothing belongs
and
to
it
anyone.
can't be seen as being mine and something I can have. But there's something that still exists.
Can you just spin that last remark out a bit more?
Well, maybe just in terms of what I'm hearing you say, clarify, tell me if I'm wrong, but you said there was a natural wisdom which kind of implied that there was something beyond,
Yeah.
you know, what we would say, this is me, this is my accumulation,
Yeah.
let's say, yeah,
Yeah.
based on my life experience. You know, there's something external, you know, or outside of that, which is, has its own.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, but no. I mean, not really. No. I like it, but that's again we're going into a story there. Like there's something external.
Tell me what you
has
mean by
its own
natural wisdom, because I think I know what you mean, but I want to hear it from you.
I'm groping for. I don't know if I'm going to be able to get it. My memory's getting so bad these days. There's a wonderful quote from Nisargadatta. Seeing, yeah, I know what it is. I've got it. Seeing I am nothing is wisdom. Seeing I am everything is love.
Yeah.
Now, if that sounds deeply philosophical, I don't know if it does, but if it does sound deeply philosophical, I don't think it is, and I don't think he thought it was either. I don't really know. I think it's a literal description of what happens, right? Seeing I am nothing is a description of an initial awakening, where the emptiness of everything is seen, but not the fullness, right?
Yeah.
Why is that wisdom? Because so many of the stupid stories we have collapse. And so we're left, I mean, it doesn't necessarily happen, but I think it's pretty damn common that when there is this initial awakening and the seeing of emptiness, there is often a greatly increased wisdom because of a reduction in stupidity. And I know I shouldn't be using that word, it's a cruel and horrible word to use. Never mind, maybe I'll censor it out later. You know, but the fact is that, you know, as long as I feel I am an embodied being, right, this is going to be full of wrong ideas. Right now, I'm talking like a communist who wants to send people to re-education camps. It is just unavoidable and incontrovertible that as long as this thinks it's an embodied, independent, separate self, that idea, that sense in itself is so wrong, is so in error, that it means that an awful lot of the thought stuff going through here, an awful lot of the stories going through here, must also be wrong. They must also be in error. So just that split second of, wow, this is all, it's just emptiness here, right? And it's like, I hate this bloody word, but it's just popped into my head. It's a modern word because we live in the age of the microchip and downloads. People talk about receiving downloads or whatever. But that is kind of like what it's like. All sorts of really crap ideas just sort of vanish, and then it goes, you know, like blah 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 blah. So this, that's what the Buddha meant when. This is what that meant. Da 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 da. So seeing I am nothing is wisdom, Nisargadatta, right? And then as I was talking about before tea, you know, let's call it the final opening, it's a nice dramatic phrase. The self drops away and it's seen that, yeah, this is empty, absolutely empty, but it's also full, and it's also full. What's it full of? Unconditional love.
Yeah.
So that's the seeing I am everything is love. Yeah. It's a really good description.
And the last part of what he says so is that my life moves between these 2 points. Something like that.
No, I think what I said, I was talking about, you know, when I was kind of a seeker, I think I said my life, did I say my life moved between ecstasy and despair?
No,
No? Okay.
no, I was adding the last bits of the quote.
What is it then?
So the seeing that, you know, my life is nothing is wisdom.
Seeing I am nothing.
Yeah.
Seeing I am nothing is wisdom.
Wisdom.
Seeing I am everything is love.
Yeah, and apparently the last part of that is, and my life moves between these 2.
Oh right, okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
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 Which is, I think that's an interesting part of it for me, because it does sort of suggest that there's something in terms of a movement.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's just poetic.
I don't know
license
what he's
here.
getting at that one. That bit.
But I wonder if that comes back to that natural wisdom, that there's something which is coming down through and into existence, manifestation, as it were.
Well, in a way, yes. I mean that's again, it's a bit of a story, isn't it? But yeah, I mean, in a way, yeah. I mean, there's nothing and everything, so nothing is manifesting. Not nothing is manifesting everything. Nothing is manifesting as everything.
As everything, exactly.
And if you want to describe it like that or whatever,
Yeah.
well, fine, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Except it's not coming down because there's nowhere that's different for it to come down from.
Yeah.
It
no,
implies different space. You know, it's so simple. In a way, when it's seen, it's so simple.
Yeah. But there
It's
is-
like, how could this be missed? And yet it's impossible. It's impossible for me to see it.
yeah,
and it's
exactly.
impossible for me to get myself out of the way.
But
So how come did it happen?
Hmm?
How come did it happen?
Yeah, I'll tell you, there's a really clear answer to that. It's a total mystery. It's a complete mystery. So, you know, the mind may now set about creating innumerable stories about how it happened. Oh, it happened because of my wonderful karma from previous lifetimes, or it happened because God took pity on me, or it happened because I wore my knees out in prayer, or any story you like, have any story you like, but they are just stories, and it's a complete mystery. Just like everything else is a complete mystery. I mean, how is this happening right now? It's a complete mystery. How is there a manifestation at all? It's a complete mystery.
Yeah. Yeah.
In a way, sorry.
I was just going to say, when you really go into that, you know, it's all happening perfectly and there's no one doing it. I mean, it just, it's kind of spellbinding,
Yeah,
really.
yes.
It's absolutely spellbinding, you know,
Yeah.
just
Out of nothing comes everything.
absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. And it's
You
kind
don't need to walk on water, it's right here.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is the miracle. It's
Exactly.
just the fact that something
Yeah.
happens, something
Yeah,
exists
exactly,
is a miracle.
yeah.
Yeah. And it doesn't matter, and it's not really meaningful, but I do find it kind of cute. I've said this many times that 21st century science seems to be giving us a view of existence which is very, very similar to that which has been you know, pretending there's time, to that which has been narrated by the great seers.
Mm.
Mm.
But that's what I'm curious about in terms of the natural wisdom again. I know I keep banging on about it, but you know, I mean, in terms of the sort of shift that happened in my experience, that it did feel like it was almost like, you know, something got unlocked in terms of, oh my God, of course, this is what they're talking about.
Yeah.
And it's like this kind of suppository of wisdom which suddenly just opened up, and it's like, and it's nothing to do with me at all.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And maybe I made a story about that afterwards in terms of, well, maybe there's something that's just there in terms of that wisdom which is waiting to be known. I don't know. But that's what it kind of felt like in my being, that there was something there available always in terms of the nature of reality, you know, the truth of
eternal.
existence. Eternal.
Yeah.
That's what it felt like. It exactly felt eternal.
Yeah.
What does it happen after a parent body dies? Like your body, my body.
Yeah.
What does it happen?
That's an extra 50 quid. You want an answer to that question? There's no answer that's going to satisfy that question, you know.
So it's also
Death is the end of the dream. Death is the end of the dream.
Yeah, but I don't mean the death. I mean the physical death, not the death of that suddenly.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Physical death is the end of the dream.
Okay.
Yeah.
Could you elaborate?
No. Well, I have elaborated in my very, very good first book. There's a whole chapter about death. But not really, no, because no one can. You know.
So it's a mystery.
It's a mystery, of course. Well, it is a mystery. I tend to use the phrase, it's unknowable.
Yeah.
So again, you know, when this is seen, we may go from a state of tension to a state of relaxation. Some of that tension that was there before may be about death. It's pretty difficult to be an embodied human and avoid tension about death. You know, it's a challenge, death is, to say the least. Some of us obviously try to avoid it by adopting one of the fairy tales about death, like Christianity, for example, or Islam, for example. You know, and that's very satisfying as long as we don't think too much about it. You know, I've got the answer about death. So, you know, to some of us that's a way of dealing with it, but you know, those of us who are kind of a bit more honest, you know, the existential question, as it were, the ultimate existential question is unanswerable, it's unknowable, but we resist that tremendously because as embodied people, as a separate person, I want to know. I do feel a bit threatened by death. Some people feel threatened by the opposite. Some people fear is the idea that death isn't the end, you know, and other people, the fear is that it is the end. But when this is seen, you know, it's recognised that it's unknowable, and so there tends to be. I mean, when I say recognise it's unknowable, I really do mean at a deep level. It's not just a thought. But when it's recognised that this is unknowable, something's unknowable, then again the system tends to relax about it.
But what is known?
What is known? This is known. This is known. It's the only thing that's known. This is known. There's the weight of a cup in my hand.
How did that change your relationship with death on seeing that? What happened for you?
The reason I'm kind of thinking and looking into space like that is I'm not sure I've got a very clear memory of what my attitude to death was before that. I think before that, you see, I'd spent a lot of time following gurus and trying to be a Buddhist, which I never succeeded at, and immersing myself in Eastern spiritual paths and so on. So I think I pretty much bought into the story that goes with all of those. So I think my attitude to death was that, you know, right. This is part of a journey, and death happens, and then there's blah blah blah, rebirth and all of that, however you like. So I think I'd come to a kind of intellectually satisfying position on death.
Yeah.
In much the same way as Christians do, only in a different way. So that was fine until I came across this, and then this blew that all out of the water. And I'm back into unknowing.
But experientially, did it feel like its own death?
Spin that out, sorry, just
Well, one of your-
spell that out a bit more.
Well, one of your books is called
I Hope You Die Soon.
Yeah, which is Tony's,
Yeah.
isn't it? Yeah. So does that say something about there's this movement that happens, this final awakening that happens, or however you want to describe it, as being its own death of sorts?
Yeah,
as it
but
were?
that is, yes indeed, yes definitely, but that is a bit different to physical death. And physical death, I think, does pose a different kind of existential problem to the kind of death of the person that we're talking about here.
What's the difference?
I think it's kind of the death of the person that we're talking about here is a death that can be experienced,
Right.
but by no one.
Yeah.
So it is a death which is known, but by no one.
Yeah.
You can't say that about physical death. Not with certainty, you can't. All you can do about physical death is speculate.
Right.
So I think what this does, maybe in some cases or a lot of cases, is that the death question loses its grip. Not because it's answered, but because it is recognised that it's unanswerable. So if you think of all those wonderful religions and the apparent billions of people who believe in them, the fascination is partly that it seems to answer the death question.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously it doesn't answer it, but it seems, well, it's obvious to you it doesn't, but it seems to answer it. So
Yeah.
Christianity, Buddhism, Judaism, Islam, blah, 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 all seem to answer the death question. So they're satisfying in that way.
Yeah.
But when it's seen that there was no one, I mean, the way it's commonly put is no one ever was born, so no one can ever die. I think the unknowability of what we're talking about becomes so obvious that it just loses its, like, oh, what the hell.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anything that can be said is just a story.
And in your life,
This is a dream, right? This is a dream, you could say, you know. But you, Luke, you're not having the dream. You are a dreamed character within the dream, we could say. What happens when the dream ends? Who knows? Who cares? Well, someone might care, but quite possibly not when this is seen.
I wanted to ask, was there only a sudden change? Like you said that it suddenly happened and the first time and second time? Or there was like a slow progress towards it? Like, let's say, you kind of experienced that you don't have, you know, you were not so much afraid about the future or not so many desires you wanted to accomplish or something like that, or goals to accomplish, or it was just...
No, there's no slow progress towards this. As Tony says, wonderful phrase, you can't creep up on nothing.
So either it is or it isn't.
Yes, you could say. Yeah. Well, yeah. So an awakening is, you know, it's not a gradual process. And you know, the seeing of nothing is not a gradual process. The seeing of everything is not a gradual process. What happens to the character Apparently, as a result of that, that may involve a process. That may involve a gradual process or quite a speedy process, but not the actual. That's just kind of in the story what happens to the character as a result, if you like, of this seeing. But no, awakening.
Character and person, it's the same for you.
Yeah, they're not the same, but yeah, in a way, yeah. I mean, a person is what conventionally it is assumed we are.
Mm-hmm. Like the ego.
Like you and me, we're people, and,
yeah.
and we have depth and desires and autonomy, and we can make choices, and we have a life we're in control of. And then a character, I would say, you know, I use that word, a character, is for what's left when all of that's been seen through. So you're still there, and I'm still here, and we can still have a conversation, but all of that stuff has been is seen through. Yeah.
And personality is like character.
Personality is personality, yeah, and it may or may not change when this is seen. I mean, sometimes there's radical change in the personality when this is seen, and sometimes not. And sometimes that radical change can create problems because, for example, if someone, let's say, is in a relationship, you know, and then this is seen and they radically change, then that can make the relationship untenable anymore. Yeah. I mean, you could say this is the great destroyer, and it can destroy many things, and one thing it can destroy is relationships. Yeah.
What's the it that can destroy relationships?
Awakening.
Oh, I see.
Because it can bring about such radical changes
Right,
in the character that's left. So let's say there's a person, what we conventionally think of as a person, there's another person, and they're married and they have a lovely relationship, and or not, blah, 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 blah. And then for one of these persons there's awakening, and then after that let's call that a character. So now there's a person in the relationship and there's a character in the relationship. And the character may or may not be very different from the person. If the character is now very different from the person, then that relationship may be untenable. And the most obvious, it's a bit of a facile example, but the obvious example is, say these two people who have this relationship, say that relationship is held together partly because they both have a deep devoted love for a guru that they're following.
Yeah.
You know, and they run a little centre in their house for this guru, and they have people come round once a week and they sit and watch videos, or it wouldn't be videos anymore, would it? Shows me age, YouTube, you know, Osho or whoever it might be, Muktananda, you know, and this is their shared purpose in life.
Yeah.
There are now one of those people turns into a character. They're not a person anymore, they're a character because they've had an awakening, and it's quite likely that they will totally lose interest in all of that kind of lovely guru shite.
Yeah.
And it's possible then that if that was what was holding this relationship together, the relationship will then collapse.
Does that say something about it, in terms of my understanding of relationships, that they're all conditional?
Yes, of
Adult
course.
relationships are
of course.
inherently conditional.
Yeah, all human. Yeah, of course. Yeah, I mean that's. There's nothing bad about that. It's just the way things are. Yeah. As people, we are not capable of unconditional love.
Yeah.
It's not possible. But unconditional love can be seen. Yeah. But this does usually come up in these meetings, but it hasn't come up yet, so we'll deal with it now. You know, I mean, we use. Other speakers also use this phrase unconditional love. The point I always make about it is that the difficult word in that phrase is not the word love, it's the word unconditional. because my contention is everybody, apart from psychopaths, clinically diagnosable psychopaths, know what love is in some form. And there are very unlikely to be any clinically diagnosable psychopaths in a non-duality meeting. They're not going to be here. So, you know, I assume that there are no psychopaths in the room. So everybody knows in some way what love is. Maybe in very different ways for different people. So love is not a difficult word to get, to understand and so forth. But unconditional love, there is no way that as a person, as a character, as whatever you want to call this, or that, there is no way that this can get unconditional love. Because by definition, unconditional means it includes everything. So by definition, unconditional love includes everything that this most hates. Or that most hates, or that most hates. So if you don't like the word hate, just doesn't love, or dislikes and so on. So it's at this point, I mean, I told this story probably 100 times, maybe 1,000 times, but you know, for this afternoon I haven't told it yet. It's this point that I tell the dog shit story. You know, so I'm giving can't quite remember where, I'm giving a talk in a German city. And at the end of it, this young woman had been sitting in the audience and she hadn't said anything, she hadn't asked any questions, but I thought she looked a bit stern, like she might not be liking what I was saying, I didn't know. Anyway, at the end of the talk, she came up to me and she stood over me and she said, you said that unconditional love includes everything. You know, is that right? I said, yes, of course, because otherwise it would not be unconditional. She said, right. I said, does it include dog shit? He said, of course it includes dog shit. Includes everything, includes dog shit. You know, and that was obviously the answer she was looking for, because she broke into a big smile and she said, that's what I hoped you would say. You see, so unconditional love, love, isn't love a lovely word? Oh, it's so sweet. And makes me feel all warm and cuddly. Unconditional love is a really difficult phrase. Really difficult, because unconditional love includes everything that I, as a character, a person, an individual, whatever you want to call this, it contains everything that I most hate, whatever that might be, including dog shit and Hitler. And if I'm a Conservative, the Labour Party, and if I'm Labour, the Conservative Party, etc., etc., etc. You know, unconditional love is way, way, way beyond the mind. And impossible for the mind to get.
Yeah.
But it can be, and I'm going to use this dangerous word, it can be experienced, but only when there's no one there to experience it. Because I as a person live in conditionality. As long as I as a person am there, my conditionality is blocking out unconditional love. And when my personality, if you like, when my personhood collapses, that's when unconditional love can be seen. Now, if I'm on a spiritual path, or something like that, I can work on expanding my arena of loveness, can't I? I can learn to love my political opponents, or if I'm a Buddhist, I can learn to love a Catholic, or whatever, but no, never unconditional. It's not possible for a person. If I buy into a story that says I should love unconditionally and try to do that, I will end up with the most terrible spiritual indigestion. I think that's also where, you know, these kinds of mysterious habits and customs come from that you get in so many religions, particularly the Abrahamic religions, are things like literal self-flagellation. So like Christians, Catholics, well, Muslims and so forth who literally beat themselves with flails and things like that. I think that's where it comes from. It comes from this idea that I should be unconditionally loving, and there's no possibility of that happening, so therefore I am a dreadful sinner who must be punished. No, I would say relax. Unconditional love is simply the case. It doesn't matter whether I see it or not. I as a person will never see it anyway. Doesn't matter, because it's just the case. Oh, well, why do such terrible things happen then if there's unconditional? Because unconditional love allows everything to be. Yeah, which is tough. It's not pink and fluffy.
Can I come back to what before that before we said that we have to experience it in one time, like to have this awakening. It cannot be in glimpse or like in a process. But if I'm, like example, I'm sitting in a dark room and I'm afraid and I think there is ghosts everywhere, and then for a second there is light and I see there's no ghost and I'm relaxed, but after 10 minutes I'm getting scary again because there is some noise that's coming, and then again come the light, and then I see this noise, it's a dog that makes it on the side and I'm not afraid of him, but then it's again dark and then again I'm afraid. So this is the process of this glimpse, I think.
Yeah.
That you see it, but you forget it very fast.
Maybe, yeah, but I'm not quite sure how you started that off. But I didn't say, and if I did say, I might have said, in which case I was, misspeaking. Ever, that it has to be like this. This is the way it has to be, right? What you're describing there, it sort of reminds me of, God, I can't remember which ancient seer it's from. It's such a famous, image, isn't it? That
Plato.
You go into. No, I'm not thinking of Plato. I'm thinking of some dead Indian, but I can't remember which one. But you go, not a dead Greek, but you go into a shed and it's dark, and you see a snake coiled up on the floor, and then there's a flash of lightning, and in that flash of lightning you see that it's not a snake, it's a rope, right? And so you relax because it's not a threat, right? And then it's dark again, and in the darkness you can't see whether it's a snake or a rope because it's gone dark again, but you've had that glimpse, and so you know that it's a rope.
But then you are not
and so you're never what?
But suddenly you are not so sure.
Okay, now you're getting too psychologically sophisticated there. So just sort of stay
It
with.
is a little bit my experience.
This is a teaching parable rather than a realistic story. So in the teaching
For me,
parable,
it's really realistic.
no, I get what you're saying, but what I mean, this is a parable, and what it is saying is like, so we can get these this is a flash of awakening. This is like I was talking about before, possibly before tea, I can't remember, the split second it may be of awakening. And what it's saying is once that split second of awakening has taken place, then an irrevocable change has taken place. You can never go back. I get what you're saying, like, meanwhile, in real life, blah, 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 but just play along with this for the sake of the story. Once you know that the snake is a rope, you know that forever. And there's this wonderful quote from one of the Upanishads, it's the only bit of the Upanishad that I can quote, which goes, the lightning blinks, the lightning strikes, the eye blinks, then you have either seen or you have not seen. If you have not seen, too bad. Now, it's a very tough saying that, but it's basically saying the same thing. There can be this flash of insight, and then if you get it, you get it. And it's like, it's kind of over then. Yeah. And if you don't get it, well, tough.
But what you're saying, in terms of what I understand, is that you can see it, but part of the knowing, in terms of seeing it, is having to deal with all of these parts of experience that still disbelieve it, yeah, or coming back to integration, to use that as a word. Do you know what I mean?
I do.
There's something that still has to
Maybe
come
not,
into alignment. No?
yeah, maybe not all the parts have seen it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
in a way, yeah, but there's a part of me wants to say that I feel like the difference is what you're talking about is a kind of is a psychological insight, and within a psychological insight, I get what you're saying there, that you can have this psychological insight and then it's gone and then you're back to the trauma again and da 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 da. But what the snake rope story about, it's not about a psychological insight, it's about a different kind of insight.
But coming back to your experience, Richard, you had the awakening, at the train station, split second, and then it wasn't fully over. You still
of course not.
You still had a year of whatever you had to do in order to get to the.
Yes, but the snake rope thing is not about anything being over. It's about an opening up to a core insight into the nature of reality, which can never be lost once it's opened up. It's not about anything being over. It's not about it's not about enlightenment in that sense, whatever the hell that word means. It's a very dodgy word indeed. It's about waking up to something about the basic nature of the universe, which with awakening is that the basic nature of the universe is emptiness. So the snake is empty in the sense that it's not a snake. The rope, if you like, is a snake stripped of all its threat, so it's empty. I don't know if I'm sort of stretching it a bit too far now.
Right. Okay.
And that initial awakening, it doesn't have to be like this because there are no rules, but nevertheless it often is, and it's written about in the traditions like this a lot, because this clearly is not an uncommon happening. It is an instantaneous thing. It's like it's here and it's gone. I mean, it's timeless, really. It's outside time. I mean, to give it a duration is ridiculous. Half a second, 2 seconds, whatever. But really, it's outside time. I mean, literally, time stops. So because we're talking, because we're spinning a story, we have to, give it a duration because things happen in time. So we say it was a split second, or it lasted a second, or it lasted 2 seconds, or whatever. But that's completely false. Actually, what happens is that is suddenly we're outside. Well, we're not because we're not there, but suddenly everything is outside time, and then time starts up again. Leaving, a Richard or a Lucas or a Jim or a Peter or a John or a Jane or a Mary who is probably in a state of shock.
Okay.
We're there, guys.
Bang on time.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I often carelessly overrun, so we've done it today. Yeah, that's it.
Thanks very much.
Well, thank you for being here.
Mm.